the Devtool and see what we have for today.
Would you be able to start off with why the developer tool even exists?
So as we know, the core component of integrating Reclaim Anywhere are the providers. Providers are essentially just a set of configurations that can be used to prove particular data in a data source. So let's say someone wants to prove the user has a particular number of LinkedIn connections. So that is something that can be packaged into a provider.
If you're a developer and you want to verify that a certain user has, let's say, 500 connections on LinkedIn, so you would come into the developer tool, figure out where is this provider that verifies somebody's number of connections, and that is something that you can plug and play. And once you do plug and play this provider, the users of your applications will be asked to log in into, let's say, LinkedIn or whatever that data source is. And then once they do log in, the verification takes place and you get access to verified information as a developer. So what are these 21,000 providers here?
So the number that you are seeing are the number of providers that are built by the Reclaim community. Every data source and every use case does change upon the end client. So we cannot really build all these data sources ourselves. So that's why we have these community providers which are built by the community, which has a plethora of different use cases. You can just pick these up and integrate them in your own app. You can just use the try demo. And then if you feel like this is something that can be integrated into your own app, you can just pick these up.
So these are things that you have to do literally nothing. You just have to copy paste the provider ID. And
Yep.
I think these days, most of the customers that we are seeing just come to this explore page and they find that the provider has already been built instead of having to build one from scratch. Not that it's too hard to build a new provider, but yeah, like you don't even have to do it for most of the use cases that are already amongst these 21,000 providers. That's awesome.
So let's start by building our own provider. Now that we have seen the ones made by the community, the way you can do this is you just go to your providers and you just click on the new provider. So here is the first screen that shows up once you start the provider builder flow. And what you can do is we need two things for building a provider. We need the provider builder and the Reclaim DevTool app on your phone. I'll just put it in my app and let's get started by building the provider. The provider that I'll be showing you today is from a website called Kaggle. What we'll be proving is whether the Kaggle account belongs to you.
The way that you're going to prove that the username belongs to you is by asking the user to log in, and after login, the user ID that basically shows up on their profile or something, right?
Yep, yep.
Cool.
So let me just put the session ID. Once I hit submit, you can see now it starts searching for the network request within the small browser that is open in our DevTool app. So now what we can do is we can just go to the kaggle.com in our mobile app. And the way you build a provider is this you just go through these requests and you navigate the different pages and see what request shows up and find the data points that you want and which request basically has that data point. So let's say you were searching for your username. So I know that my username is Chinmay something. So I'll just search it here and it will reduce it to the request that has that particular data. Now within this, you can choose which one suits you the best. We do support cascading requests, so you can select multiple data points from multiple requests and it will still work. Let me click next. So in this page, now we will actually select the data that we want from the request. We can do that in two ways. One is by the AI assistant that we have, which is like really convenient and it is super accurate. And it will suggest you what pieces of data that you can select from this request. Or you can also go to the manual tab and just select the data from here itself.
So there were a bunch of these requests that we saw earlier, and then we took a guess that yes, this is the request that might most likely consist of the data that we actually want to verify, in this case, your username. And In that request, there was actually a lot of other information also that came in, not just your username. So I can see that there is user ID, display name, but there's also user country, performance tier, or whatever. So those are things that we do not care about, at least for this provider. What this interface is letting you do is essentially pick only the data that you want to verify.
That is correct. So let's just go ahead and add the user ID that the AI has suggested, which is exactly what we want. So I'll just click add, and it just adds the data field to the request.
So when you say you're adding this to the request, what does it even mean?
Okay, I'll explain you. So that piece of data has a couple of things encapsulated within it. We can see that when we click on the edit button here, if we see here, it added a couple of things here. It added, obviously added the variable name, it added a description, then it added a JSON path. JSON path is the place of the piece of data within the JSON object.
So essentially, what this is doing is telling us exactly where in the response the required information resides so that we can verify only that part, right?
Yep, right. This is the next step. There might be instances where the request URL contains user-specific information. For, let's say, example, after get page data by URL, it might have my username after this. So let's say slash Chinmay. But then if we just put that URL as it is, that it will only generate proof for my account. So what we can do is we can add some wildcard characters to this URL.
And
Yep.
actually, there are like probably hundreds of providers in the Explore Providers tab which have this particular step missed. So it works only for the one user who actually created the provider. So I think this is
Yep.
important for the audience to note because it's a common mistake that they make.
Yep. Yep.
So essentially, what we want the developers to be doing on this page is look at the URL and kind of guess that this is probably something that might change, right? So if it's a username, it's obvious that it changes for each user, but sometimes there is like timestamps or session IDs that are part of the URL. So it needs a little bit of attention to detail over here for the developer to guess that, hey, this is probably something that is going to be different for different users. And just all that you have to do after that is just click on that part of that URL.
That's correct. Yep. All right. I think this is a pretty straightforward step. Here we add the name for the provider,
This is what
gives.
allows the provider to be discovered on the Explore Provider page when somebody comes in next.
Then we have the first page URL. That is something that will pop up once the verification starts for the first time.
Most of the data that we typically want to verify is information that shows up after the user has logged in, right? So it's very important that the user logs in first and only then the proof verification starts. So the first step in most of the providers that are created on Reclaim Protocol is to log in. And this is the login page that first shows up once the user starts a verification on their app.
Yep, that's correct. Then we have steps to follow. Steps to follow are instructions that show up in the verifier app. So let's say the user has to go through different pages after logging in. You can put the step one as log into the website, then navigate to a particular page. This can be avoided to some extent by using injection, which are coming up in the next steps. But this is a good step to have for educating the user. So what I'll do is I'll just put in steps like login to Kaggle, then I'll put navigate to profile page. And I think those are the two steps that are required for this proof to start generating. Again, okay. This is the place where we add the injections. Injections are JavaScript snippets that can be used for a wide variety of reasons. I think most of the providers on Reclaim use injections to navigate to a particular page after login. And if you see, we have a sneak peek for a AI feature coming up, which will be revealed in the next podcast. So stay tuned.
So ideally, on the previous page, you put in two steps. One was to log in, and the second step to navigate to the profile page or whatever. But if you set the automation to automatically go to the profile page, then essentially the steps that the user has to follow is just log in, right? And then everything else is automated.
So we can add a particular region in the geolocation.
You want to make sure that the websites from which you're generating these proofs actually sees an IP address that is from the same location as that of the user, so that the website that is rendered for the user is actually consistent with what they would normally expect.
Yep. The next thing is the browser user agents. User agents are way to tell the website what kind of device and the browser the request is coming from. So there are some websites which do not support mobile versions, such as Spotify. If you go to Spotify on a mobile device, it will basically redirect you to their own Spotify app. So the way to generate a Spotify provider would be to add a desktop user agent so that the website thinks you're coming from a desktop site, and you can just try out different user agents and see which one fits. And the details are just advanced settings that for now we can ignore. Let's go to the next step. Okay. Now the provider has been created, and the way to activate the provider is to generate at least one proof. So what we'll do is now we'll scan the QR code and generate a proof for our newly built provider. Okay, as you can see on the screen now, the proof has been generated and now the provider is active and we can start integrating this in our own applications. So let's just click publish. There you go. You have your own provider. Okay, let's talk about editing providers. So providers have two sections. One is the metadata section. The second part of the provider are the configs, which actually change the workings of the provider. So the provider version uses Semver for the numbering. The way Semver works, as everybody knows, it has a major number, minor number, and a patch number. The way we have integrated this in our provider config is that in case it is just a copy change or it is a very trivial change, we consider it as a patch change. If is a change that fixes the provider, but the client app doesn't have to change anything on their own, which is like a non-breaking change, we consider it as a minor change. And any change that breaks the client app and changes have to be made are considered as major changes. All of the logic is abstracted away within behind the update provider button. No, you don't have to think about any of this, but it is just a good to know. The place where you will have to think about this is while integrating the provider in your SDK, where I will just show you to you how you can specify the provider version. So let's go ahead and edit our newly created provider here. The way we can do this is click on edit version 1 because obviously it's just the first version. You can see the drop down here for all the versions. We just have one. Let's go ahead and click on edit. Now we are taken back to our familiar provider builder. So now you can just again edit, add any pieces of data that you want from the request. What I'm going to do is I'm going to deliberately break the provider here for a feature that I want to showcase later on. So let's just go ahead and let me just break this. All right, now let's just go through the rest of the editor. You can edit any of these fields from the builder if you want. I'm just going to go ahead and submit this. You can tweak any of these settings if you want. Again, these are the same things. Okay. So now let's go ahead and update the provider. Okay, once we click on the update provider, as you can see, it suggests a new version based on the changes that we have made. So let's just click on update and let's go. Now you can see here that we have another version.
So now you have these multiple versions of providers, but you're going to be integrating only one. Do you want to show how to exactly integrate this into an application?
Yeah. For before we start writing the actual code for the integration, what we need to do is we need to create our own application. So let's just go ahead and click on new application. First, we have to add the application name. The second field here is the application website.
So this is the website that we will be using to promote your application, whether it be on our Twitter handles or on our newsletter, wherever. I think the application website is the link that we would give on that promotion.
Yep. The third thing is just your application logo. I'll just add a demo name. Let's just create the application for you. You are prompted to add providers to your application. If you don't add any providers to your application, you won't be able to use them in the SDK. So we suggest you add the providers here, or you can add them later on in the details screen as well. So I'm just gonna go ahead and add the new provider that we created. So now we have added the provider to our application. Now let's just go ahead. So these two things are very important when it comes to the Reclaim integration. Be sure to note the application secret somewhere, as you won't be able to see it after this screen. Or we have landed on the application dashboard. You can add more providers if you want. And you can open the documentation from here for the different platforms that we support. I'll just go through the platforms on the docs website here. We can see we have the Web SDK, we have the React Native SDK, we support iOS and Android SDKs, something for Flutter, for Ionic. We support a lot of blockchains, as you can see here. Here we can see the all the platforms that we support for our integration. We have web SDKs for front end, back end. We support in Python and JavaScript SDKs. We have React Native, iOS, Android, Flutter for mobile development. We have Ionic. We support a lot of blockchains as well here.
So wherever you want to integrate, we probably already support that platform using our SDKs. So you can just integrate the SDK directly.
Okay, so now let's start integrating the provider into our own application. You can follow any of these guides on our docs website here. I will be using the JS SDK. When you start integrating, the first thing that you will call is the init function. Here you will add the app IDs, app secrets, and the provider ID from the Devtool. We have multiple additional options that you can read about. Here, all right. So I have set up the example repository now. I have added the application ID, the secret, and the provider ID from the DevTool that we created. And now let's just create a session and see what happens. So the QR code has been generated. I'll be scanning the QR code and trying out the provider. So now we see that the proof is stuck. So to debug this, now let's go back to the application page and I'll show you how to go through the logs and find out what's wrong.
This is because you deliberately
Now we,
broke it, right?
yeah, this is because we deliberately broke the JSON path. So now we are back at the application dashboard. Let's go to the logs tab. And I know that this is the session ID for the session that was not working. So let's click on the session. At the bottom, we see the actual logs. They will help you debug any issues on your provider. We also have a section on top here called Insights. This will sift through the logs below and tell you what you can do to fix the provider. So here you see it is telling me that the JSON path of the element is failing because we deliberately broke it. It tells you what you can do. It also gives you the exact log line where it broke. You can also check out all the error messages on the guide here on the top right. And we also get the verification steps based on the events that happened within the session. So the insight section is extremely useful in case someone is new to integrating with Reclaim. They don't really have to sift through all the logs and go through each one and see what went wrong. we can get a summary on top immediately.
It's awesome. So now can we go and fix this?
Yep. Now we want to again use the provider, but the current version is broken. So we remember that version 1.0.0 was working. So what we can do here is we can just specify the provider version in the options and just fix it to provider version 1.0.0. Now it will always pick up the working version.
So we actually do expect and recommend people to set the provider version, especially in production applications, especially because a lot of these providers are community providers, and you don't want somebody to be able to break your application when they modify the community provider on their end.
Okay, there you go. We have fixed the provider again.
Awesome. Can we also see the logs of the successful one on the application dashboard?
For sure. Let's go back to our application dashboard. We'll go to the logs. This is the session that we just generated proof for. As you can see, it says success. It notes down all the events that occurred.
So these logs clearly are super, super useful. This is a new feature. This did not exist before. So previously you would have to contact the Reclaim team and we would have to look at the logs and give you information. So finally the logs are available directly to the developer. And as we just saw, very useful for debugging issues that come up in production applications. Thank you for walking us through all of these details. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Where can people find the DevTool?
You can go to dev.reclaimprotocol.org and start tinkering around right away. Do let me know if anything is missing, any feedback. Always open to making the changes for you.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much. And see you on the next pod. Take care. Bye.